you should be ready to go with that. Okay, super. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just basically share my screen, and do let me know if you're able to see it, please. Are you able to see this screen? Yes, no?
Yeah, yeah.
Super. So we're going to be doing the first part a little bit more interactive, just to warm ourselves up. Then we're going to go into the a specific kind of like topic and tools, and then we're going to have a final part to do a simulation of it with other members here at the community. Okay, so hopefully then that gives you a complete experience there for everyone, those that like to listen, those that like to engage, and those that like to just have hands-on. Yeah. For those of you that want to participate in the presentation, you can go to www.menti.com and use the code 2896224. I will also write it here in the chat for you, and this will allow you to engage to the part of the presentation in which we're going to have just some questions and sharing. Okay, and this is it. Okay. There you go. And that's the code. Okay. So hopefully this allows you to come here and share. I will check also very fast here on my phone just to make sure that it's working too. And as I mentioned, the code is 20A96224. Okay. So there you go. We're here. Some of you are already here. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so let's kick it off then. So Agile experimentation. Interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to you as a leader that you're working in this area. But let's actually kick it off with, what are the three crazy things in your mind right now? And I don't want to ask about mood. I actually just wanted to shake it off. Is there anything crazy in your mind that you want to share with each other? Let's see. All right. If there's any crazy stuff you want to share, feel free there to pop it on and share it. Skiing. Someone wants to go and ski. That sounds awesome. Dancing. Okay, someone wants to go dancing. Baby stuff is mine. Definitely mine. Ice cream. All right. Bad weather. Party. Sleep. Hungry. All right. Yes, I support that person that is sharing there that's hoping that the pandemic is over. Is that crazy? Yes. Experiment, paint. Oh, that's actually quite interesting. I wonder if we can have like an agile painting session. How would that be? Iteration after iteration. Actually, I think do we have here? Yes, we do, because some of the books that actually were shared with us are talk about like how we can make ideas pretty visible, right, by the team member of the community. So not too crazy at all. Let me just let in some teammates here. Okay.
And Sullivan, if you are not familiar, he was a big.
There we go. Okay, so several of them are just joining at the moment. Let them in, and we should have everyone there. Okie dokie. Super. So I think in general, guys, you're really not too crazy people, really. I've seen other stuff actually. All right. So, but in general, it also seems like a good mood there. Cooking. Whoever's cooking, what are you cooking? Amazing. So also to make sure that we tailor today's activity more to you and make the best of your time as possible, can you share with me why are you here? What are some of the key insights that you're looking? So I write it down and I make sure that as we go through the main material that we have, we also hand highlight or recommend you resources if we can on those areas that are of your interest. Okay. So let's see. Whoever wants to share that, let me know one of the things. Okay, yeah, so learn more, learn some of the tools, curiosity. Okay. So it seems like in general, everyone is kind of in an exploratory mood today, especially with the experiment sessions. And for those of you that are actually looking for tools and technique, I'm going to share with you a bunch of them, but making actually emphasis in those that I've used the most. Okay. So I think I can bring you more value in those, especially. Okay. So great, sounds good. So lots of you are kind of like a more an explorative approach. So it would be good the framework that I actually have for the session. And for those of you that wants tool and techniques, don't worry that we have a mural that has actually 93 pages with different tools and the pros, the cons, when you can use that, etc. So you can take it and like you said, yeah. So that will be fine. Okie dokie. So that sounds great. That's for the most differences. Okay, so very interesting. Okay, so then we might open up a lot of questions as we go through the approaches of how else can we do this if anyone has any other experience. So those of you that are looking for the differences, okay, get that. Maybe what are those different approaches? Awesome. Okie dokie. So then let's start getting into the topic. Okay. What is experimentation for you? Right. When we were in high school or early in our early age, we were exposed to kind of like that scientific method and a little bit of what experimentation could be. But as you have evolved professionally and as you have become a little bit curious on this topic, what it is for you. What do you think experimentation is? And this doesn't have to be, theoretical. It just can be, one word, one sentence. What it is for you? Okay. All right. So taking something new with trial and error. Yes. Try something new. Fail fast. To fail and to retry. So this is very interesting because we're going to see that a lot of the literature actually in experimentation, you are actually testing, right? And the testing involves kind of a structure and just a simple trial. But I understand what some of you actually means. Maybe is exactly that. We will overview this because there's a little bit of controversy of why when we actually talk about experimentation, we are testing rather than just trying things out. And what does that mean, right? New and better ways to do things. All right, so in general, we see experimentation, as a tool to actually get those things better, okay? Now, what do you think is important experimentations for businesses, teams, and actually for individuals today in this fast-paced world? What do you think experimentation can bring to the table that makes it worth it to invest money and resources of our organization? Why do you think it's important? All right, so some of you are actually seeing it as a source of new answers, okay, of new opportunities. Some of you are saying more productive. All right, wonder what do you mean with that part of productive? Maybe you have tried other tools and you have found that they do not really give you kind of a conclusion of what you were looking for, give you really the insights of what works and what doesn't work. I don't have complete knowledge of everything, hence experimentation. Yes, okay, so just facing the uncertainty, new ideas, new solutions to be checked. Yes, some of us are going to see that this is the focus. Sometimes we are actually over experimentation on that and bring up new ideas for discussion. Okay, it's important because we want to cope with the real world under unsecure conditions. Thank you so much for sharing this because we're going to see that one of the things that actually drive experimentation in business is the uncertainty. This is this thing, of the VUCA world, but just put it simple, uncertainty. Yeah, we want to control what can be the business outcomes. Hence, this is another tool that we find sometimes comfort in, especially if we don't understand properly what its scopes, its limitations, and when we should actually use it. Yeah, so very nice. Okay, great. And what are the challenges that you're facing in your experimentation? I got a list, and we're going to go through them of challenges that actually some of you might have encountered in the everyday work. especially those of you that have worked with the startups that are trying to test value propositions, or that are trying to create new products, right? We come to face a lot of challenges, but still, those of you that are in big organizations that are more stable and that even may lead this area, may have a good basis in experimentation, you might find still that there's some challenges there. Okay, so one of you is actually sharing fear of failure to satisfy the customer need. Yes, so really have that proper customer information that feeds that hypothesis for the experimentation, right? The lack of resources, totally. Sometimes we don't have the time, the people, the systems that can help us, and even the organizational structure that can help us go about it. Okay, the different thinking. Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. All right, guys. So hopefully this will give you an overview. I think I'll leave this question to the side. We're going to go over some of the tools, so don't worry. And let's actually kickstart it. Right. And we're going to just kickstart the part of experimentations with a case. Yes. This is a Microsoft case. So as you see here in Microsoft, there came a moment in which an employee actually suggested that if they change the description in which they were showing, for example, the flowers, if they use the second line descriptions for the selling of the flowers, and by moving it in the top, his hypothesis was that actually he believed that this could improve the level of revenues that they could get, right? This generated a lot of controversy within his within his team and with his manager, because actually kind of like they thought the common thought and kind of like the data that they had actually said that basically if you make these titles longer, the engagement drops drastically with that link. Yeah. Hence, the idea to make the ad headline longer was something that the team thought it wouldn't be relevant to test, and that they should go on and keep with the current practice. Okay. So actually, this employee grew a little bit kind of like upset with this. 6 months passed and he still had this hypothesis that if he make an ad headline longer, it would work. Yeah, especially if it has this type of descriptions. What do you think happened? Because what do you think in this case, just to let you know, this employee decided to forget his line manager, forget his team, and actually go and test it. He was able to put the testing and the experimentation together. He was able to put the experimentation together by himself. Okay. And he did this experimentation on the side without his line manager permission, even though the line manager suggested that this wouldn't generate the engagement. Okay, so what do you think happened to this idea in the case of Microsoft? Do you think it succeeded? Do you think it actually failed? Or do you think that it generated no difference? What are your thoughts? Anyone wants to like share what do you think it happened?
I think the manager won't appreciate that.
Okay, the manager didn't appreciate it. But do you think that when the employee went ahead and did his experimentation, what do you think happened? Do you think the experiment was successful? Do you think the experiment
Successful?
You think it's successful? Okay, like who else think what do the rest of the people think? Fail, publicly fail. It was a success. All right. So some of you are saying, you know, like it failed and publicly affecting the company, right? And some of you actually say no, it was a success. Okay, fail. All right. So very interesting. This experiment done by this employee on the side of his line manager in Ben, of this Microsoft employee, was a success. Okay. Was such a success that when he ran the experiment just a few hours later, a too good to be true alarm, that it's one of the alarms that Microsoft has for its when they do this type of experimentations, and when it got tracked, right, got activated. So even in the case of Microsoft, they went and checked, what happened here. There might be a code issue, right? But they actually ran again the experiment, and the experiment kept generating actually an increase in the level of revenues. And just to put it in a very numerical way, the analysis of that came from this experiment was that basically by doing this change, they achieve an astonishing 12% more revenue, right? Which yearly it compounded to more than $100 million in the United States. So very interesting. This employee that had this little hypothesis, like if we change that description, yes, and we add it to the headline, even though it's going to be longer, people are going to click more on it, and it might generate more revenue, so it will increase the revenues. Turn out to actually be true. Like it did that, right? And it generated actually more money to the company. And let's just think about it. What is $100 million more in a year, right? Given a little change. And the interesting thing is that this would have been missed if this employee wouldn't have had the capabilities of experimenting and running his hypothesis by himself, because he did not have the support of his line manager, who thought, given his experience, that it would have another intended consequences, right? So this is very interesting for several reasons. This case, can anyone point out what are some of the things that emerged just from this little case? What are some of the things that emerge for you, like that pops into your head as we see this case?
Brave employee.
All right, so you're seeing it on the human resource side, right? So it seems interesting that sometimes it's good to have these employees that are a little bit courageous, that are capable to implement those experiments, right? Those little mavericks, right? It seems like sometimes interesting to have them, because he did not follow his line manager, right? So that's very interesting. Anything else? It makes sense to give it a go, right? So for some of you, it's popping that idea of like, sometimes it's just good actually to give it a go, right? Rather than to gate ideas, right? So actually, this case shows a lot of things, and we're going to see throughout the presentation. For example, if you see it from an organizational point of view, sometimes we take decisions based on experience rather than on true, experimentation, as we're going to see, or following data. So we are going to see that there's many biases that come into play sometimes in the decision-making process within our organizations that sadly can reduce the level of revenues and innovations that we could achieve. And this case, the bin case, which you can find more about it in Trustworthy Online Control Experiments, paper by Cambridge, is only one of the many cases that show how important it is actually to give a space within the organization to test rather than to jump into conclusions. Okay, so let's move then directly to this. So what can be actually the power of experimentation? And if I may, I will actually change to the proper presentation now, because from now on, we're going to actually engage with this one. Okay, so I actually put you there three main things, and also we begin as always, because you know that we're always nerdy, sharing with each other different books. I think as an economist, one that I really liked is this one that is called Experimentation Works. It's by a Harvard professor. It's very easy, and I think it's organizational friendly, in a sense that if you're in an organization, they're trying to introduce themselves for the first time to the experimentation. I think this and, for example, a sprint is some of the first that are, you know, like very easy for people to digest and get to work. And then the third one will be this one, testing business model ideas, is if the organization is going down that route. Yeah, those are three easy win type of kind of like books on the arena, and feel free you guys to share more with each other, right? So what can be the power of experimentations? A lot of things can be said here, but I put you mainly three. One is that experiments can actually be a structured engine and strong engine for innovation. And we're going to talk about why do I say like a strong engine or a good engine for innovation. Yeah. Then you can see here that also power is that engine today has become actually more powerful than ever, because having a lot of digital products and or if you're in a company that is mainly in the digital arena, you know that you have so much data and so many tools to actually co-create with your customer that final product and gain insights of what can work, what doesn't work. So more than ever, actually, experimentation can provide you that insight of what actually works and what doesn't work, right? And the third thing is that the power of experimentation can be is that it can actually allow you to reap the full power for enhancing in your organization that that spark of actually testing ideas rather than just relying on experience and on data, right? So this is actually something very, very interesting. So it kind of like strengthen the muscle for us as team member in an organization to very quickly sketch, engage with customers, analyze what's the result or outcome of it based on that prototype that you put together, right? And then get information for better decision making, right? So it's very interesting just to start getting that competency. And it's not easy. In my case, I've worked a lot in startups or in organizations that are in that scale up phase. And to be honest, it has always been kind of a pain to actually acquire this skill. This is why I say that now more than ever, it's actually very powerful to be able, as a team member, as a team, and as organization, to know how to do this, okay, and do it fastly, and or do it repeatedly and with the and in the right way. It can give you a lot of advantage, because then you have those insights for decision making faster, right? And this, of course, makes the decision making better. Some of you might be blessed in a sense that you're part of organizations in which experimentation is something that has been embedded. This happens a lot in pharmaceutical organizations, or those of you that work, for example, in big companies or in big player companies such as, you know, Google or Facebook or Indeed or Expedia. We're going to see some of the examples, or even Booking, like where you see millions of experimentations per day, right? There, the muscle obviously is way much stronger. Now, we said that experimentations can help you innovate, and we know that innovation is a very complex topic, right? There's different type of innovations, there's different models in which we can say that there's something is innovative or not. There's even different contexts that help innovation to come to happen. There's even different ways in which we can measure innovation, yeah. But ultimately, the key point here to make is that actually experimentation is one of those key tools or complements for innovation to happen. Yeah, they are usually pretty close, as you see, and both in certain way seek to actually reduce that business uncertainty. So many times experimentation can help you, for example, in your area of research or development, you know, to know if it work as intended. Okay, in the area of production, for those of you that work in the product area, our key question is, can we effectively produce this and scale it, right, in a way that it generates the returns on investment that we expect, right? But for those of you that are actually more focused on the customer experiences, like, experimentation can help you solve the question, does the product, the experience that we are creating, or the service, or the solution, let's just call it solution, that we're generating, is really addressing our key customers' pain, gains, needs, jobs to be done, whichever framework you use, but are we addressing that? So it can help you with it. And finally, in those of you that work more at the strategic area, experimentation is very interesting because it also allows you to kind of explore if the money that is being invested on it really is generating the return that you expect in terms of your competitive position in the market. Yeah. So as you see, there's many uses that experimentation can have, and through which it actually complements the innovation of the business. Okay. Now, the interesting thing here is experimentation as a complement to innovation, okay, which not necessarily is just the invention, which we tend to measure in terms of economic, like from an economic point of view, in the patents that the companies have. As you know, from an economic point of view, we have many companies that have patents, but they're actually not generating returns on them. So it's more interesting to talk more about experimentation to leverage innovation. Why? Because usually when in economics we talk about innovation, we're talking about something that is novel in an incremental, architectural, disruptive, or radical way, but that also has value, right? So it's more interesting also to explore how experimentation can enhance innovation rather than getting stuck on experimentation for invention. Yeah, especially if the invention from the beginning, you're seeing that it won't generate that novelty and that value. So this is something that you will see across the presentation, that is experimentation leveraging the innovation. Yeah. And as you see in the areas of products, services, digital experiences, customer markets, business models. Yeah. But for those of you that are not working in digital companies, that, you're working in retail, great retail companies. Also, we've seen a lot of retail organizations also innovating in the experience and testing. We're going to see some of the cases in just a second. Okay. So when I was 25, I created a company that was focused on public opinion research. And we had a very interesting client. It was the intelligence agency of Venezuela. And we had to provide public information through surveys, through ethnographic research, through focus group of what the Venezuelans were thinking, so the president could position his message, his campaign, his policies. So this meant that in a year, we ran minimum 50,000 surveys. Okay, so it was a very hands-on every week work, right? In which we really had to be in touch with learning what they thought, what they say, how they say it, what they wanted. And also, focus group constantly. Even I found myself 2 months living in one of the key, voter segments that we wanted to target, just to see how they thought of politics and manage with it, right? So these are methods that we call traditional. And actually, I just want to make the point that they still are very useful. They provide a lot of information. But sometimes they're not enough to know that something works. Yeah, especially when we go to, I'm not going to talk about right now of the politic arena, which I'm very passionate about, but I'm going to talk about the product arena. When I made my change from working in public opinion and policy to products areas, what I see is that many of these tools actually do not provide you fully with what you need to know that product actually will be purchased or that customer will really get sticky to that site or to that community that you want, etc., whatever your product is. Okay, so here's just a reminder that nowadays experimentation comes to complement what traditionally have been source of information for the development of products, for the development of policies, even for the development of electoral campaigns, believe it or not. So experimentation nowadays is used by companies, by political parties, and even governments that are trying to position, that set of goods and services in their customers, right? So experimentation, key message, comes as a complement, and it's mainly because some of these tools have downsized. I put you here a very funny example, and this is by a very famous cartoonist, is the Market Tunis. He has amazing cartoons. As you can see here, the problem, those of you that have done kind of a focus group, that this happens a lot. People say something, but they do another thing. So it's kind of this is why experimentation also comes to happen, okay? Also, experimentation is something that has gained a lot of hype in organizations, especially in those that are going pretty horizontal, and in which they don't like too much hierarchy, but that they have what we call this venture capital organizational approach, because it helps to undermine what we call the hippo effect. Yeah, people just doing what the highest paid person in the room says, even though sometimes that person opinion relies only on their experience and on the context that they come from, and that is not suitable to the context that we're trying to analyze, or the hypothesis that we're trying to find what is if it's true or not. Okay, so if we reject it or not, for example. Right. So you have a very famous example in the case of Penney. Some of you might have been exposed to this. Basically, Penney decided to bring, a CEO, Ron Johnson, given his great track and his great outcome in the case of Apple, creating all the Apple Store concept, being behind it. And what we saw is that 18 months later, they were basically firing Ron Johnson because he tried just to rely on his experience and do the same thing that he did in Apple, but it turns out that it wouldn't work for JCPenney's market, yes, and the way of the customer of JCPenney and what JCPenney was, right? So they later on did an interview to him, and it was very interesting because this is actually a guy that within the sector is not known to be like arrogant or anything. So they asked him, what happened? Because some of you know that just JCPenney filed for bankruptcy, right? So what happened? So he says, well, I was a victim of something called situational arrogance. I basically didn't run experiments. I relied on my experience, right? So, this is very hard for a leader that had a chance to be highly innovative and then had to go through this. And basically the learning there is, if we can put together a simple experiment to try to test those hypotheses that we have, rather than going full on, it might help us for what we call preventable failures. So let's see from one of my favorite persons, what do we call, why can this
to be innovative, you have to experiment. If you want to have more invention, you need to do more experiments per week, per month, per year, per decade. It's that simple. You cannot invent without experimenting. And here's the other thing about experiments, lots of them fail. If you know it's going to work in advance, it is not an experiment. And what happens in big organizations, that Amazon's a big organization now too, the Air Force is a big organization, is that we start to confuse experimentation with operational excellence. So operational excellence is one of our 4 key principles at Amazon. We're building a fulfillment center. We've built over 150 large fulfillment centers around the world now. We know how to do that. That is not an experiment. If we build the 151st fulfillment center and screw it up, that's just a failure. That's not the kind of failure we're seeking. We want failures where we're trying to do something new, untested, never proven. That's a real experiment, and they come in all scale sizes. So you need to teach people that those two kinds of failure are different. And you need to have, you said something about that hard middle where ideas don't go up. I think this is such an important thing. At Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea. And then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. And then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we get, you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes.
All right. So he also goes on to sharing a little bit about the human talent, something that one of you share of also having, making sure that if you want to have an experimenting organization that is highly innovative, also have, some team members that are a little bit of maverick. But once again, as you see, innovation and experimentation goes hand to hand. And it's also very tricky because sometimes organizations are confusing operational excellence with innovation, and it's not the same. When you're testing novel things, new products, things that you haven't done before yet, this is when usually experimentation has a space to shed lights on, if the hypothesis that you're seeking to test or no, you can reject it or not. But if you're, just trying to improve a thing that you kind of have already done, like, does it make sense to call it, experiment, or are we just doing something that is called operational excellence, right? So this is something interesting to have, because sometimes this is confused. So let's actually start with the basic as we enter the topic of experimentation. And by the way, if it's okay, in 5 minutes, I'll give you a comfort break because in the second part, we're going to be trying out stuff. So just to let you know. Basic checklist before I want you to have the basics right. So what do you need to check before you jump into an experimentation? And this is something that I have seen in some organizations. They don't pause and ask the question if really experimentation is the right way to go, because believe it or not, experimentation sometimes it's not what you need to get your conclusions and make decisions, right? Like, I'll give you an example. You can not experiment a company acquisition, right? Because you either acquire or not, and then you learn what the consequences are going to be, right? So this is just a very drastic example, just to make the case that there are things in which experimentation doesn't make sense, right? So that's also important. So checklist before jumping into an experimentation. First, does it make sense for this decision to be driven by an experiment? or what you're looking for. You know, if you're looking for to kind of like just gain some insights, research a little bit of what are the pains, the gain, but you're not really going to do anything, you know, a product, or seeking to test if someone is going to purchase or if they click more, etc., then maybe experimentation is not the way for you. You know, maybe some of the traditional tools that we've talked about is what work for you. This is why I recommend once again this book of Testing Business Model Ideas, and some of you also have the Design Thinking Toolbox, etc. book, because it allows you to see, you know, depending on what you're seeking to do, like understand, get insights, etc., what might be the best tool for you to use, right? But the key thing there is like, don't jump into experimentation. Then if you decided like, yes, experimentation does make sense in this case because I have a hypothesis that I want to test, we're going to see that some of the key terms that we usually use in experimentation. Then the thing is like, does the experiment have actually a testable hypothesis, something that is precise, that actually can once I put it out, can let me know fast what is the result. Yeah, is there a commitment to abide by the results, whatever they might be? Because, you know, if you want to do an experiment which requires time, you know, different resources, and you're not even going to abide by it, then why are you doing experimentation, right? Can our organization actually do the experiment? In a sense, do you have, you know, everything to run the experiment? Yes or no? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So contemplate that. Then how can we ensure that the results are reliable? That's the other thing. Sometimes we want to jump into the experiment, but we don't even make sure like that those results are even reliable. We got some result, but it turns out that we didn't have representative samples, for example. Okay, they have low confidence levels. So then, you know, it's not reliable, right? So can we ensure that the experiment give results that are reliable? Do we understand the cause and effect? Sometimes we have hypotheses that don't even have that. Yeah. Is there a causal proposition behind it, or it's just a correlation? And I know there's a lot of controversy here, like, oh well, it's okay for us to experiment sometimes correlations, right? But you know, we've seen crazy correlations, like if you have small hands, you have a larger lifespan, and at the end is because you have a third variable there, you know, it's gender, for example. So it makes sense for you to actually stop and explore what is the causal, that you're actually exploring a causal effect rather than a correlation, right? Because if not, you might be doing a misuse of resources. Then have we gained the most value from the experiment? And this is important to us as an organization also, if you have, you know, say yes to the other one, because if you're planning to make your organization one that experiments constantly, fastly, and that gains those learning, it will also have a cost. So what is the cost of running experiments? Does it make sense? Until what point it makes sense to scale it within the organization, in a sense that it generates return on investment as expected, right? So it is also very important to ask if you will be able to track what is the value that you can get out of the experiments. So as you scale them, they also become a source of revenue for the organization rather than a cost, right? So talking about the experimentation in an easy way, you have there what is called the experimentation wheel. It's a very easy way to see what goes on in an experiment. So those of you that came today with a little bit of an explorative mood, you know, when they talk to you, oh, we're going to do an experiment, it comes to be this easy, okay? As you learn it when we were kids in the scientific methods, for those of you that picks the sciences, you know, I picked sciences. I loved all the area of like math and physics and biology. So that was my area, and we had to do this constantly, right? So what do you do in a simple nutshell? So you basically generate a testable hypothesis. Yes, you run your experiment in a disciplined way, which means that you seek the information, you seek to, you basically figure out how you're going to test that hypothesis, you run it, and then you will get some insights that allows you to reject or to accept that hypothesis. Yes. And then with those insights, you act upon them, right? That's very important. And this is actually a difference that I put from the book, because the book actually said something like, what was it? Oh yeah, so then you have some insights. No, you act upon those insights, because this is actually why some experiments suck, and I have seen it. They run the hypothesis in a disciplined way, everything, then we get the learning and no one acts upon it, right? So it's, once again, it comes back to that first question: are we really going to commit to do something with the results of the experiments, right? So that's something important, and that can be actually, to decide not to proceed, to change that user journey or that button, or to make purchasable this product. But in that case, you're acting upon it. You just, the result doesn't come to be used in an empty space, right? Which sometimes happen. It's scary, but it happens. Okay. So before you go to your comfort break, let's see how this go for those of you that actually work with what we call agile teams. So as you know, in agile teams, this will actually becomes more frequent, okay, and a little bit faster sometimes, right? So some of you might be running weekly experimentations, or some of you might be running a 2 weeks sprint experimentation. Yeah. But what you usually see is that you finish that first sprint, either 1 week or 2 weeks, and you're immediately gaining that information. What happened to the hypothesis? Do we reject it or not? And then you integrate that learning to the product, you set the next steps, and you go to the next iteration, in which you might make a changes to the product, a changes to the user journey, a change to the experience, or a change to the pricing model. And then again, very fast, you close it up, you decide what happened, what happened with your hypothesis, and you move on to the next iteration, if so, right? So what happens from an agile point of view is that you have this more frequently, more constantly, and it can be actually quite exhausting. So you need to have the right teams and team members, in a sense that you really need to have, that squad that really likes intense, fast-paced environment, that is very driven to get insights, and that acts upon what insights they get, and that they're fast in the integration of that, either in the experience, in the product, in the business model hypothesis that they have, so it can work. Yeah. So as you see, the other thing is that the agility will come not only measured by us doing it in the right way, but actually it comes by us being able to do it in a competitive way. And this is quite tricky, because some of you know that sometimes we don't have privileged information on this sense of knowing how our competitor is doing this in their organization. Sometimes what we know is if our competitor has experimentation or not, but we not necessarily have the privileged information of how they do it, how they run it, and how fast are they with this, right? Ultimately, if you do have this actually gives you a better benchmark of how agile are you being, because with this information, you can know if your team is actually being faster than your competitor, and hence, are getting insights. Now, this doesn't mean that your products are going to be better, that are going to be more innovative, because at the end, it's not about speed, who does it faster, but it's actually who understands better its customer. This is why actually, like the Amazon approach, I don't like sometimes to measure agility against the competitor. I like to measure agility about the customer centricity. Yeah. How able are you to know what your customer needs? How fast are you able to know what your customer needs and to act upon it? I think it's what truly makes you agile. But I do feel that it's fair for those of you that also keep an eye on the competition, while also contemplating your agility, to put it there that some organizations that have this agile experimentation don't only then have that customer focus, but also that piece of information of how their competitors might be doing this experimentation too, right? So this is how kind of an iterative wheel of experimentation could look, right? And a great example is what we call Amazon flying wheel. Yes, for all the process of experimentation and innovation. Experimentation comes to impact all of this part. Okay, so all of like the part of the lower prices, the selection, customer experience, right? And usually that feeds the whole Amazon growth ecosystem. So basically, behind all of these key variables that drive Amazon growth, what you have as a basic framework is the experimentation, which is what Jeff was kind of like sharing that he did from day one. And those of you that follow like Amazon, the shareholder, the financial report that they give every year, and the letter to the shareholder, you can see that from day one, like until the last, in which now we're going to have the change. What you see is constant experimentation by Amazon, by Jeff Bezos. So the experimentation actually affects everything that has to do with the selection, customer experience, traffic, seller, and also it supports what is the underlying part, which is lower costs and lower prices, right? So should we have a little break? So you have some coffee, some tea, some water, maybe 3 minutes, and should we come back? What do you think?
Great. Yeah. Comfort break.
A comfort break. Okay, let's have 3 minutes, and then when we come back, we're gonna see what is a very kind of like effective how-to you can go about experimentation, especially if you're starting in this arena. Okay, so 3 minutes of comfort break, and then we can come all back. Super. Let me stop here the chair. And let me
See.
it's trying to find out if a product is actually like if we actually use if we put all our online courses as a package, can we will sell it or not? Yeah, so they're trying to see if by putting courses in a package, the customers will buy it. Okay, and then we have, because we're agile, right, that given that Scrum says that we have a product owner, we cannot do the experiment, and then the organization don't get the information until they recruit a product owner. Something that helps actually to overcome this issue is having an open mind, that when we talk about agility, is actually about making things happen, getting the right things. This is why I'm also sharing with you a sprints, because a sprints not necessarily might have, the formal product owner. It can have a decider, hence it can free the organization to actually learn what they need to learn, rather than just be stuck with the agile approach. Can everyone see that? Because I think this is an issue that sometimes we have in experimentation, right? We're saying, no, we don't have all the people according to the Scrum, so we won't go and we won't do the experimentation. Guys, that's crazy, okay? So I wanted just to make the stop there to share that, okay? So some of you will actually just be exposed to the method in the mural. Basically, its sprints will allow you and your team in 5 days to very quickly run your experiment, okay? And this is sometimes even more agile than when we decide to run experiments in a sprint of 2 weeks by having the product owner, the executive, all the builder team, and all the structure, yeah? Yes, it's ideal. We need to have the team that's gonna come to the experiment, but please do not stop your experiment if you don't have all the Scrum roles, okay? Because remember, at the end, what you want to do is test a hypothesis, and just learn if that hypothesis, you should reject it or not, gather that information, act upon it, and help your business, right? So do not let sometimes like that agile ways to the agile framework to delay the experimentation that the organization needs to actually improve their products, the experience for their customer, or gain more revenue. Yeah, I also share with you in this presentation a little bit of how it goes in Google. I will put it a bit fast if it's okay with you, so you can see very quickly how it goes.
Great design happens within constraints, and those constraints are good because it helps narrow your focus. There's something about the pressure and, in many cases, conflict that creates good things. So in our context, a sprint is a very focused, intense period where we have a team of people coming together from different disciplines and focusing on solving a specific design problem. In this case, we're doing a sprint at a pretty massive size.
Too often, there's a process where one group works on something and then they hand it to the next group, and then that group hands it to the next group, and something gets lost in translation. So this is a mechanism where we can all get together on the same page because we're all in the same room, and you get much more tangible results much more quickly.
Product managers, engineering, designers, it's really a chance for us all to work very closely together and to really see product development through the eyes of others that are on the team.
The ability to kind of leapfrog the traditional design process is incredible. Here is a chunk of time, here's a bunch of experts, and we're going to make sure that you have everything you need to just focus and come together and be super successful.
I think a lot of people's idea of creativity is you have this freedom, leaning back in your chair and just imagining things, and it's really not like that at all.
Watching what was going on yesterday, there was a lot of arguing, there was a lot of dissatisfaction, and they had to figure their way through that. And so today they're actually testing their prototypes and getting validated or changing tack a little bit. And that's kind of the magic of it when you see these transitions that these teams go through.
I like it because then that way you have a kind of a go-to person in that new store.
A lot of what comes out of Sprint Week is this intangible camaraderie that helps us work better together. But the second part is the projects. A significant number of projects come to life as is or very close to what comes out of Sprint Week.
What we're trying to do here is create very high-quality deliverables that turn into real products.
An actual artifact at the end that you can then take to engineering to build, or you can take to customers to get more feedback on. We hope that there will be a lot of the projects that people are working on that will get picked up in some form or another, but there's really no losers. When you participate in a sprint, you either win or you learn. There's ideas that get cross-pollinated. People are making connections. People are having a chance to work with others that they don't normally get to work with.
Maybe they only knew each other via email, but now they actually really know one another, and they have insight into the things that they each respectively work on.
Every piece together here is bigger than the actual sum of the parts. There's something bigger and more special happening here.
All right, so as you see, the interesting thing about the Google sprints is that it's a very compact experimentation process, and actually having this 5 days really puts you in attention, especially when you are for the first time starting to do it, and you get incorporated in one of these teams and you have to work with your other team members. It is true, there's a lot of controversy sometimes. So what is the best, I don't know, like the storyboard, user journey, or when you're doing the sketches, or when you're building the prototype and that final one that you want to put to test with 5 customers, right? But it actually makes experimentation more of a habit as you get better in the organization, and it puts you also in that mindset of being able to sketch ideas. I think it's something very valuable, of being able to create a prototype that might not be perfect, but you just get it done, and then that habit of also putting it in front of the customers, 5 customers that you have, you just that you selected for them to overview that and then get their impressions, then that also brings back some information that it's very useful for what you're doing, right? So as I mentioned, this is another agile way in which you can conduct your experiments. Not at all the only way. As I mentioned, there's some teams that they take a sprint of 2 weeks to overview this, or it varies. The important thing at the end is that as you do your experiment, have a hypothesis, okay? Have a testable proposition about how a treatment is generating a causal impact on a measurable metric. If that metric is aligned with your business OKRs or with your product aims, even better, right? Don't have like diffuse things, like make sure that you're testing that. Make sure you know what are the things that you're controlling, what are the things that you are having variations in, and make sure also as you approach experimentations that you integrate your team into that process, that no one is kind of like out of the loop. Also, to make that learning in the experiment a little bit faster, make sure that you got handle those those operational drivers behind the experiment, right? So the learning from the experiment is the best, right? So be aware of the fidelity, of the cost, of the duration, of the capacity, of the concurrency, of the manipulation, of the control as you set up these experiments within the organization. Yeah, this is sometimes things that we do not take into account, and then they don't make the experimentation as agile as it can be, right? Also, make sure that you always keep in mind that difference, right? And that you don't fall into the trap that we many times fall within our organizations if we don't keep our eyes open, of having a waterfall approach to the experimentation, you know, like we build, and then we release. You know, make sure that you're really doing those little releases. This is what I like about the Google Sprint. Like, you really have those 5 days, do that release, test what happened, and that gives you faster information for actually improve that prototype that you're trying to put out in the market. As I mentioned you before, there's some giants. Some of you might work in them, have friends that work in it, or have heard about them that have been pretty good in this agile experimentation, right? And in a sense of making it continuously and actually having organizations that have an experimenting culture. Here you have some examples, and you have here some kind of like some interesting quotes that you can find about some of the members of these organizations. I already put you a video of Jeff Bezos sharing what he thought, but for example, here the ex-CEO of Google, you know, we try things, we celebrate our failures. This is a company where it's absolutely okay to try something that's very hard, have it not be successful, and take the learning from that. So also having an organizational culture that kind of foster experimentation, allows experimentation to actually happen, yes, and people to get better at it. You have also companies that might not be platforms that you have engaged with in the last 24 hours. Okay, or that produce digital products but are more kind of like in the retail arena, and that doesn't mean that they are not producing also or doing experimentation. Yeah, so at the end, as you do your experiments, you'll see that you will also have a chance to explore what's the your organization's maturity in it. Some of us have been in organizations that are at this point, you know, very towards the early stage, but some of you have been in organizations maybe that are towards the later stage. Whatever the maturity of your organization, the cool thing is that as organizations start having more frequent experimentation cycles, what you can see is that they mature. And the first stage, sometimes they go through what you call that awareness stage. Then they start seeing some benefits of the experiment, especially if they were properly designed. So they move to that belief stage. They start also committing to the execution of the result. As I mentioned, I've been in organizations that they move to the belief stage, but it has been hard just to really commit in the execution of all. But other organizations actually, you know, move on and commit to the execution of what they got from their experiment, and even to diffuse it and embed it in the organization. There's a very interesting case in this book that I share with you, that is the case of Booking, and how they actually allow all their employees to do experimentations, and any employee can actually say to a colleague to cancel an experiment that they're trying after they showcase it. And it's a way it's a very interesting case because it shows that experimentation is not done or accepted by a committee, but actually anyone in the organization can do it. But everyone in the organization also has some good induction on how to do it, has clear guidelines, and has also the power to veto in case that when the experiment idea is showcased and shared with the organization, they're seeing some pitfalls. Okay. So that's very interesting, and that's a case of in which experimentation has been embedded in the organization itself. Okay. So some quick learnings that I wanted to leave you before we go right now to the mural for you to play with the tools is one, and I want you to actually share your learnings in experimentation if you have. One of the things that we got to have in mind as we try to develop the experimentation process within our organization is to try to make it from the start something that can be repeatable. right? That is not only that a few of us can do in the organization, but actually that a lot of people can get to do in the organization. So more ideas can be tested, and then the organization benefits from that, right? And that means make sure that from the beginning, when we're setting that experimentation process, it is scalable. Okay, it has a good scope, right? And it has speed, in a sense, not of like just doing faster, but just of eliminating the bottlenecks that are stopping us from getting the results of our hypothesis. Yeah. So that's what I mean there, not just like do it faster, but just speed in sense of attacking the bottlenecks, right? And I put you there an example that I think is quite good, because if IBM, that has been a company with so many years, that was pretty traditional, was able to move very fast to this style. Maybe those of you that have companies that are more medium sized or more lean, or more small than IBM, then maybe there's chances for us also to achieve that, of course, is if we build that right infrastructure, right? The other thing is that second thing that we mentioned, to make sure that we really have that right culture for experimentation. And that means that even the leadership should see experimentation not as something negative, because remember that experimentation doesn't assure that all the experiments are going to work. Some are going to work, some are going to show us that are, some hypotheses we will reject, some hypotheses we will accept, and some they won't have any variation, right? So like even if it's a failure, you need to have a company which like that's embraced, that curiosity is something that is cultivated, and that experimentation is not seen as a loss, right? You don't want to have that manager that says this as failure, right? Like that shouldn't happen. The other thing is that making sure that data trumps opinions, and this comes to the thing of not over relying in experience. I'm not saying that we cannot take experience into consideration. What we're talking here about is that we need to not over rely in experience. We need to make experimentation a complement, that it's integrated in our decision making if valid, and that hopefully it also help us overcome some challenges in the organization, like only listening to what has been done before, or what the person that has the highest power says, right? And the final thing is, as I mentioned, democratize it. Don't make it something that only the innovation unit does, or the innovation committee does, or what they call it, or the innovation squad. No, democratize experimentation if you are an innovative organization. And yes, that means that you need to manage, that you need to set the guidelines, that you need to lead the process, but that's what leading experimentation and innovation requires. So don't like democratize it, so the organization can actually fulfill its fullest curiosity and learn from it, and test, okay, experiment. So I have here some cases too of other leaders in different organizations kind of like sharing how this process has been for them, as they have started to do this experimentation. And you see it's very interesting. See, so for example, you have this: if the test tells you that the header of the website should be pink, then it should be pink. You always follow the test. So it's that mindset of like, well, let's just take decisions based on the data that we're getting from our experiments and act upon it, right? So another interesting comment that I found was this one: you can't have an ego thinking that you always know best. My role is to create a place where people can do their best work. So actually embracing also experimentation will show us as human beings different than we think of, that 8 out of 10 times like we're wrong in what we're even inferencing, like, or thinking about. So that's actually also very hard, but it comes to happen when you start experimenting. Just to give you an example, I thought of what I thought it was like, oh yes, I'm sure that we will be able to actually get revenues by selling online courses if we do this subscription model for the courses. And you know what? In the first 5 interviews, like the customer told me that sucked, that was terrible. You know, it was hard because it was the idea that I loved, but you know, that's what it happens, right? So that also has to be embedded in the organization. And the other lesson is, finally, do create the system, resources, and make sure that you have all the organizational support to make this happen, because it's not easy to adopt testing frameworks and build trust in data. This is something that requires for team members to learn how to create hypotheses, how to evaluate feasibility, how to evaluate reliability, how to set up causality so they don't do experiments on correlations, right? Helping them build like their strong analytical competencies so they can use more statistics as they go about the experiments. Okay, so that's interesting too. This is, as I mentioned, you know, like helping team members to actually go from what you call like weak hypotheses. You know, we can extend our brand market to actually helping them define those. You know, opening stores 1 hour later to reduce operating costs will not lead to a significant drop in sales. So you have a treatment that has an impact on a metric, right? So this is how you formulate the hypothesis as you go for the experiments, right? As I mentioned, give them the tools so they can learn, you know, how to test, yes, how structure their thought, you know, how they're going to verify, what is that format that they're going to use, what are those metrics that this test is going to impact, and what are going to be kind of like those criteria that they're going to use for success. So create that infrastructure, and more important, you know, gather also the learnings, because not all your hypotheses, you know, you will have to reject some of your hypotheses. So you want to gather that information too, and make sure that you take actions upon that, right? So that's just kind of an example. Please, as I mentioned, don't just bring people to brainstorm to later go to a no innovation committee that nothing happened there. And finally, if you're the one that is leading the innovation in your organization, which is amazing, best of luck for you and lots of lessons too. Remember, you know, to set grand challenges, in a sense, like when you're setting your challenges, a grand challenge here, I don't mean an ambitious, but one that actually supported by a hypothesis and that aligns with your OKRs or your KPIs in your organization. Make sure that you have some of the systems, or get the people that can help you put those systems in place, so you can really lead your organization toward that innovation idea that you have. And try to be a role model of this experimentation approach by being the first one to ask and say, well, let's test it, you know, because I don't know. So that's kind of things that can help on that. Okay, so super. With that, we had kind of like a very brief introduction to those that like this part. Now, for those of you that were seeking tools, what I actually have is a variety of them. So we will go to the mural, and you have their access immediately to them. Let me just actually put here very fast. And what I wanted to do in these last minutes that we have is for you to actually check it out with a community team member. So this can allow you first to build a new meaningful connection, but second, get insights from them, because they might have tested this tool, as it happened actually in one of my previous sessions. They might have tested the tools and they might have some feedback from you. Okay, let me just put this here. So here you will have access to the mural. By the way, we will share the presentation as always we do, the recording as always we do, okay? And some of you might see that there's a PDF here. As I mentioned, the books that I recommend you that are very practical, highly practical, are the one testing business ideas. You have a bunch of tools, okay, there. The one of a sprint for those of you that are starting for the first time to do your experimentation and you want to do it fun, fast, and get some insights. Super good, great, okay. And the other one, those of you that are more, you know, strategic yeah, that you like to set up the strategy framework for experimentations in your organization, you have Experimentations Work, right? That's another book that you can use. I will make sure to put you those reference there. Now, because I couldn't find a free PDF of this, yes, and I cannot breach all of this things, what I did for you is that I put you there one that I found on the web that has a lot of tools already. Okay, especially because I know that some of you are coming to the meetup to get this insight. And this is a wonderful kind of inventory of tools. Okay, so you will see here from 32 on, yes, that you have an inventory of like different tools to gather information, okay, about the customer, but also to experiment and innovate. So I thought that this will be very interesting for you to have, okay, and check it out. Especially what I wanted to do is maybe break you into rooms, and then you can share with each other. Let me know, can you access the PDF, guys? If not, let me put the link here again for all of you, okay? Right here, I will put it, okay? And you have access to them. Now, the thing about this one, different from the one that I recommended you, Testing Business Model, is that Testing Business Model, what it does is that they have the same tools, but they divide them, like those tools that you can use for experiment, and then they divide them, use these ones, you know, and then you can pick which is the more relevant for that hypothesis that you want to check out. They usually, for those of you that have it or that could think about have it, you have kind of something that is called like the discovery experiment chart. It's very cool. And then it allows you to see, you know, what tools you have there to actually use, you know, like A/B testing, when you can use A/B testing, when no, web traffic analysis, you know, mock-ups of like apps, etc. Right? So it has wireframing there for some of you that have used wireframing and sketches, yeah, and everything. So what I want you to do then, if it's okay, then let's divide you very fast, and we will have 5 minutes, okay? Check with the community member that you have. I will do random rooms here, okay? Which are some of the tools that you like the most, and ask them which are the ones that they have used and which are the ones that they don't like, because maybe you can get some insights there of what, you know, what are optimal to use or which ones not, for example, okay? So let me create the rooms very fast. And remember, ask your team members, you know, if they have worked with the tools, pick your favorite tools. You can also ask them, you know, of those tools that you like, if they have used it, if anyone has any feedback on it, so you can gather that information, or they have had challenges. Yeah, so these are things that allow you to learn. So I will open the rooms, and you have top 5 minutes, guys. Okay, very fast. Sounds good? Let's go.
I still.
Can you go, Leo? Do you want me to send you the link? Yep. All right, like a chord, yeah. All right. So everyone is joining. There we go.
Banks, they are more on the conservative side of the organization. So they are not like, you know, the Spotify or the latest and the greatest, I would say, startups. Mm-hmm. So depending on which style you would like to, you know, to do, depending on your type of companies that you're working. Anyway, yes, we can have another session on that. Absolutely, I will be glad.
Super. Yeah, so I will send the link for this evenly, no problem. All right, team. So ideally, this gives you kind of like a little flavor of what you were mentioning. Those of you that were seeking to explore a little bit about experimentation and how it can play out in terms of organization, and how can be an image for it, can give you then an introduction to it. Now, the topic is a little bit more complex. Yes, especially when it comes to evaluating the significance of the hypothesis, right? So I think this will deserve just a little bit of a separate introduction to it, because then it will put us, you know, when you can have type 1 errors, what we call that, and how to define, you know, what's the null hypothesis, the alternative ones, etc. Right? So the confidence levels also of the experiment. But I think more than that statistical part, what is key is to have actually this notion of what role plays experimentation, how it can look at organizational level, some of the drivers that you got to be aware of, what some questions that you can ask, and where kind of like some preliminary tools that you can start looking around. Yeah. And as I mentioned, ask members of the community, because there's a wealth of expertise here to further, you know, get some insights. Yeah. Awesome, guys. So have a happy Saturday. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you also, Luisa, for coming and sharing. I will send again the email. I'm a bit upset because I created a little image and everything. So, but I will send that again. Okay. And let me know in the chat of the Agile leads if anything there is needed. Okay. I will also copy the emails that you guys also share here just to forward you right now, Luisa's email. Okay.
Question, Natasha, please. Are you going to, you know, sort of share the recording for today, or?
Yeah, I'm going to share the recording because this is a community recording. I put the community always in the community channel. Yes, no problem.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, the community channel, is that on Meetup or on YouTube?
No, that's in the YouTube, because in the Meetup, you know that we cannot put videos. We cannot. We cannot upload pictures. And sometimes I upload some of the pictures of the templates, but then people work with that. So I send them the mural, and then I send them the YouTube. And actually some members of our community, for example, like also Luisa, send us images of books, and I also share it.
Do you mind quickly sharing the YouTube, I mean, link for the community, please? Because I mean, I have not accessed it before.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me just very briefly go here.
Thank you.
You will see there also the previous events.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was my first time of attending any of our events, so I haven't attended before.
Yeah, no problem. No, don't worry.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
No problem. Let me share it with you here, and then you might have it there immediately. And yeah, and then I will upload the video of the session there. Okay.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Have a happy day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.